Hi there. This is a conversation with PFlow. I'm happy to have you. You know, I've been spending some time thinking about relationships. So I pastor, as you know, and one of the things that you have to do as a pastor is actually build relationships with people or help people build their own relationships. I've had the privilege of being able to speak to different couples sometimes when they're going through difficult and challenging times in their lives and realizing that sometimes the fundamental building blocks for a long lasting relationship are not exactly taught to us when we're young. So we walk into marriages, we walk into relationships with highfalutin expectations, expecting that the person who you're going to end up with is this Saint Teresa who's never going to do wrong. I was watching a video clip recently, and a very popular Christian actor who was talking about his wife, and he said that the very day that they were having their marriage, he promised his wife that they were never going to have any fights and they were never going to have any disagreements. And literally that night, they had their first fight. And it was so funny. He said that they can't even remember what caused the fight, but that fight led to the fact that they probably didn't have any form of intimacy for the first 2-3 days of their marriage. Thankfully, they've been able to repair that phase. And I've tried to figure out in all of these conversations, and also in relationships that I've had, what are the key fundamental building blocks for a lasting relationship. And the first thing that always strikes me is that the first thing that breaks down when a relationship isn't working is communication. When two people are not able to reach an understanding on any issue or be able to see things from the same perspective. You must understand that we're different, right? I always say that two people come out from different homes where they were born, from nature and nurture, and they come together and they're expected to live under values that are completely different from the ones that they formed during their formative years, and they're supposed to live that life without any problem. It's going to be very difficult. So you must spend time communicating with the person who you're in a relationship with. And by relationship, I'm not honestly just talking about marriage. It might be a business relationship, it might be a work relationship, but an open line of communication where each party is able to speak without judgment is a fundamental building block for a lasting relationship. Imagine if I grew up in a home where the way we express ourselves is by raising our voice and by having a boisterous environment. And then I'm married to somebody who just likes quiet environments, quiet conversations. And so every time that I speak, it sounds like I'm in a fight. And for us, it's like, why are you shouting? It's just the two of us in the room. And you are just expressing yourself with your own, the way the family used to express yourselves, which is with a lot of emotion and with a lot of aggression. So in those relationships, you have to be able to communicate. You must understand what the other person is saying. My coach used to say that you must observe the 2-minute rule. I struggle to observe it as well, So this is also a learning process for me. The 2-minute rule says that when somebody has something to say, for 2 minutes, you're not allowed to interject. You're not allowed to even ask questions. Well, you can seek clarification, and you have to let the person know, I just want a clarification to what you said. And you see, what happens is, a lot of us, we only listen to respond. And I'm probably guilty of that as well. I'm sure if you spoke to my wife, she'll tell you that I'm very eager to respond. But it's something that we have to work on. Don't listen to respond. Listen to be able to understand what the other person is saying, and then you can respond. You see, when you take time to listen to what the other person is saying, there's so many nuances that come into a conversation. We say that communication is actually 5% verbal. A lot of the communication actually comes from body language, the look, the face, facial expressions. They communicate to us as we go on in our lives. And that's very important for you in your relationship. Communicate. You keep talking. You must keep talking about your differences. Even keep talking about the things that you agree on, so that there is no confusion in each person's mind. And this will be a big contribution to your life. Now, the second thing is respect for the other person's opinion. Look, when I got married to my wife, right, we had this values clash that was so severe that I thought that marriage was not going to last. She had completely different values from the values that I had. I come from a 1 million shades of grey perspective. For my wife, it's either black or white. So imagine the two of us butting heads consistently, trying to see which views we're going to dominate. And it's strained our relationship. I wouldn't even lie, because I wasn't going to back down. And she felt her values were superior. I felt my values were superior as well. And it took carefully trying to understand where the other person was coming from, and also trying to understand why those values were important to them. So you see, for me, I make excuses for my family simply because my family were there for me in my darkest period. So even when my siblings offend me, I'm very quick to forgive because they stood by me in my darkest days. So if I married someone who doesn't understand that I would always make excuses for my family, we're likely to get into conflict. So for me, family, my immediate family, is so important to me that I wouldn't trade them for anything. I might be married to someone who is not close to their family, and we can have conflicts like that. And a lot of marriages, they collapse because of that. Now, trust. I think this is something we always hear about. Once trust is broken, it's very difficult for you to rebuild it. My wife describes it and says that trust is like a wound. When it heals, there's always going to be a scar. So you can't really easily rebuild trust once it's been broken. In fact, there are people who have extreme views about this trust thing. And they say that once trust is broken, you need to walk away from the relationship. I don't believe that is true. I think that trust can be worked on. I think that if people are falling out of trust with each other, that they can deliberately rebuild their trust. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of dedication to the cause. You are not going to get distracted just because you failed once. On this show, I've consistently talked about failure. That failure is not a bus terminus. It's actually a bus stop. The bus doesn't stop permanently at a bus stop. It stops at a terminus. So if you're at a bus stop of failure, you can always start the car again and move on. But if you failed when you're in keeping trust with the person you're spending life with, it's important that you're very deliberate in trying to win that trust back. And I pray for you that even where you have lost trust, that you are able to rebuild it. Now, I have my love language. I always said that if I did not meet one of my, best friends now and coach, he's called the catalyst, Larry Olushola, that I would have had a very difficult marriage. Larry Olushola was the one who opened my mind to who really I was in terms of my personality. And I realized that my love language was completely different from that of my wife. My love language is gifting. So when I give you something, I want you to appreciate it. It's important to me that you appreciate it. I may not acknowledge your appreciation, but I want you to appreciate it. And I'm married to someone whose love language is quality time. She just wants to be around you. And I am a loner. I like to be alone. So imagine trying to find the balance amongst all of those things, but understanding that you are two completely different people and that you are going to see life from two different perspectives, but being accommodating enough to be able to see those differences and celebrate them is an important part of your story as you build your relationship. Now, I talked about the fact that my wife's love language was quality time. Well, for your relationship to make sense, you've got to spend quality time with each other. I'm sure my wife's ears are ringing as I'm saying this because she demands that I can do more in that regard. And I think it's important. When you spend quality time with each other, you actually discover the person who you're married to. So many times we get married to people and life just happens to us and we really never know them. Then they will do something and you're like, I can't believe that's the person that I married. The reality is that it's because you didn't invest time. When you invest time in a relationship, people, the reward for investing time is quality. The quality of the relationship improves, even if the quantity of time you spend together is not the same. Look, we're in a world now where men and women go out to go and find the daily bread. In the past, our fathers would go out, our mothers might be working smaller jobs. But now, the economy has meant that everybody has to put something on the table. That means that families are spending less time with each other. And that's the reason why we're having strains in our relationship. So make out time for your family. Make out time to hang out. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can just actually go and sit in a park and just have a drink. But find time to spend time with your family. I also say this. This is extremely important to me. avoid making assumptions. Oh my God. People are so quick to jump into conclusions without even understanding what the other person is saying, what the person is doing. You see something, rather than ask questions, you immediately conclude and make assumptions. It is the easiest way to break the foundations of your relationship when you haven't waited to hear the truth. You haven't waited to hear, even the person was going to tell a lie. But at least hear from them first before you come to conclusions based on your own assumptions. Assumption is a dangerous thing to bring into your relationship. If you are confused about anything, ask a question. Ask that, I don't understand this. Can you explain what happened yesterday? And the person can explain. Because if you start making assumptions, you can actually destroy the foundation of your relationship. This one is very important. So I have a friend who says these cliches. I don't really like them, but it's something that he says. He says women don't like to take responsibility. That somehow they're going to find a way to blame you for something that has gone wrong. If you want to live a healthy life and have a healthy relationship, you actually have to learn to take responsibility. If you have messed up, you must be able to raise your hands and say, you know what, look, I overreacted yesterday and I'm sorry. I'm sorry is something that you have to learn. They called it magic words when we were growing up. The first magic words, please, sorry, thank you, and all of those things. They are even as important as you're an adult as they were when you were a kid. When you are wrong, just take responsibility. Don't pass it off. Oh, it was because you did this, that's why I did that. It was because you did this. No, you did it because you wanted to. Take responsibility for it. You actually are acting in respect to the person who you are with. Now, I talk about compromise, meeting each other halfway. There's so many times where you want completely different things. The wife wants to go to holiday in London. You want to go to holiday in Abeokuta because that's what you can afford. And your wife wants to go to holiday in London. You must have a way of compromising. Compromise is important in every relationship because you are not always going to agree. You are not always going to agree on the course of action. In fact, I say this even at work. I work in an organization where there are 4 partners, or 5 of us, 5 partners. And we all have completely different perspectives to life. But guess what? We cannot take any decision as that organization without all agreeing. Imagine how if we did not understand the art of compromise. 5 people sitting down in a room and we have to reach a conclusion on something and we must all agree. The only way we can achieve it consistently is if we are willing to compromise. So compromise means I don't like it, but I'll do it because I care about you. I don't want to do it, but I'll yield space for you just because you are my spouse. And when you bring compromise into your conversation, you realize that the room for conflict is actually reduced because it means that you pick the big things. Okay, so yes, the next point is only focused on the big things. So I say this to couples and I say, your fights, when you have your your disagreements, they have to be about big things. You can't disagree about toilet paper and who left the toilet seat open or who opened this Coke and did not close it back. Come on. Life is more important than that. I say let's keep our fights for the big things. The sun is not coming out tomorrow. Yes, that's a big thing. Let's fight about that. But wasting your energy on small conflicts, actually what it does, it builds a relationship full of resentment. Because what happens is that you start to tiptoe around each other. I don't know what I'm going to do that's going to upset him. I don't know what I'm going to do that's going to upset him. And the moment your relationship gets to that point, your relationship is done. You need to rebuild. You see, because I want to be able to make mistakes without me being afraid of the consequence of you destroying me just because I forgot to close the tap and the water has run out of from the tank. Yeah, we can switch on the tank again and water will be full. So we don't have to break our relationship because of that. Focus on the big things and don't argue on small things. Be patient with each other. Patience. The Bible talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and one of them is patience. Be patient with each other. Yeah, I know Nigeria is tough. I know Nigeria puts us under a lot of pressure, and there's so much tension around. And the truth is that we thoroughly don't have any patience for each other. I drive, and when I drive in other countries, I actually realize how impatient we are as Nigerians. If you want to change your lane, all you need to do is trafficate, and the person will yield space to you. In Nigeria, the invitation for the guy behind you to speed up is when you trafficate. The moment he sees your traffic light like this, he just increases his speed. And I'm like, you're not running anywhere. Just calm down. Just be patient. Being patient means that you are giving the other person room to grow. You're not in a hurry to judge them. And you see, that is good for your relationship, because your relationship becomes stronger because of it. Now, this one is also one that I think a lot of couples don't do. You have to make each other a priority. I know that can be difficult, because they say to you to prioritize your life, God first, your family second, and your job third. The truth is that sometimes your job is going to come second, and maybe sometimes it might even come first. Because if you have bills to pay, you have to be able to balance between time spent with your family and times doing the work that actually pays your bills. And that's where you have to be careful. Don't put yourself in a position where people are able to look at you and say, this one doesn't even have any patience for anyone, and is not willing to make anybody a priority. It's just about them. Now, you see, what happens is that when trust is consistently broken, people decide to focus on themselves rather than focus on their spouses. And that's where you have to do a lot of work. Don't break trust to the point where the other person feels, I need to protect myself from my spouse. I need to protect my mental health. I need to protect my physical well-being from my spouse. That's a dangerous place for you to be in your relationship. And I'm hoping that if you are there, you are able to claw back from that. Now, especially in marriage, you must understand the sexual preferences of your spouse. In this day and age, where sex has become so commoditized, it's very possible for people to abuse it and to reduce the importance of it in a relationship. I believe that God created that level of intimacy for us to build a connection with each other. And as such, sex should never be used as a weapon in a relationship, either for correction or for punishment. It must never be. You must understand the sexual preferences and cycle of your spouse and be willing to make compromises. I know couples, I've counseled couples who they'll say to you, Pastor, we've only had intimacy once in the last 18 months. That is scary, and you need to deal with that. So because what happens is that the moment you've removed the sexual intimacy in a relationship, especially in a marital relationship, what happens is that people start to drift apart. What binds you together as a couple starts to loosen, and you don't want that to happen to you. I would say you should also be careful when trying to resolve conflict by not resorting to the blame game. A lot of us are under pressure to come out of conversations as the clean one. I'm not the one that was wrong. I'm not the one that did the bad thing. When you go into blaming each other for things that you should both take responsibility for, you create resentment. So when I know that no matter what happens, I'm going to be blamed, what happens is that people become flippant. People become flippant in how they act and how they think. And you don't want to get to the point where in your relationship, you've become very flippant and you don't really care. You see, it's always good when couples are still having a disagreement because they care about each other. It is a disagreement that comes from resentment that is the worst one to have, because there are no rules. That's when they call each other names, they get physical, they get abusive, just because the only way they can deal with the hurt that they're carrying is to hurt others. You know what they say about hurt people hurting others? It is true. So you must heal. You must allow each other heal. You must help each other heal so that you don't carry your pain and your trauma into your relationship. Final point I will talk about today is forgiveness. Oh my God. They say that men are very quick to forgive. I don't know whether it's true or not. I haven't done a poll on it. But I know that there are a few women that I know in this world that do not forgive. In fact, some people remember what you did on the 15th of January, 1966 at exactly 11:23 p.m. They know exactly what happened and they cannot forget it. And the man will never leave it off. No. You must have a forgiving spirit. In one of my car conversations, I said that a forgiver is a person who lifts the burden off himself. You just lift the burden off yourself, and you're not carrying any baggage as a result of unforgiveness. You have to make sure that you're not carrying unforgiveness in your heart, because what unforgiveness does is it breeds resentment. And what does resentment do? It breeds hatred. The end of hatred is a divorce. I want to pray for you this time, because I don't know what time you're going to be watching this, that even where your relationship has been broken, that God gives you the wisdom to be able to rebuild it and the strength of character to be able to stand behind your spouse. I have enjoyed this, and I honestly will say that I've learned something from it as well, even for myself. My name is Femi Oladein, and you've just had the conversation with PFlow. I'll see you again next week. Take care, and God bless you.